From bloody punches to scary knockouts, Tony Ferguson has had some pretty crazy finishes in his career, and they're all worth remembering. So why not look back at some of the most brutal ones? Well, let's do just that. I'll start with Tony Ferguson versus Edson Barboza. This was back in December 2015 at the TUF 22 finale. Now, we all know Edson Barboza is regarded as one of the best players of this time. He's a force to be reckoned with, so people were super excited about this fight because, of course, Tony kinda has the same reputation. And surprisingly, after this fight, he just gained a lot more respect from everyone. Throughout the fight, Tony stayed dominant, not letting his opponent make any moves that would make the fight go in his favor. Although both the fighters had a pretty good chance of taking the win, Tony knew he had to give it his all, and that's exactly what he did. Within the first 30 seconds of the fight, it was still unclear which direction the fight was going to go in. Tony was dominating, but Edson wasn't holding back either. Ferguson kicked his opponent in the face to make space for himself, but this strike cost him a point because it was illegal. But that didn't stop Tony from winning.
Absolutely, that was an illegal kick to a downed opponent. And he can't take a point away.
Because in the second round of the match, he landed a spinning back kick on Barboza that sent him crashing into the ground, leaving Tony victorious.
Declaring the winner by submission due to a Darce choke, Tony El Cucuy.
Now, if you think doing illegal stuff is as exciting as it gets, you're not ready for this next one. Ferguson versus Kevin Lee.
I said it since the beginning. I feel like Tony's been the #1 contender for a while. He's definitely the toughest fight. I like those big challenges.
There was no kicking in the face in this one, but that doesn't change the fact that it was one of the most brutal in Tony's career because there was something better: personal beef.
You got attitude problems. You're just like that dude that could never really cut it on the team. That's why you move forward, man.
This was back in October of 2017 at UFC 216. The fight was pretty interesting. No one could tell which way it was going to go because both of them are fierce as hell. Not until the third round, at least. The fight was a treat for fans because they knew the personal feud between the two fighters was fueling their performances. And you know that makes for a pretty intense match. At the start, Ferguson didn't seem to be all that strong, with Lee dominating the first round for the most part. That is, if you ignore the warning he got for having a high mount on his opponent. In the second round, things didn't really look all that different, although Ferguson did seem to be making a slow comeback, landing some pretty good strikes at his opponent. Then finally in the third round, he shocked everyone when he put a triangle choke on Lee and forced him to tap out. Not only did this get him a lot of respect and fans from the UFC world, but also the interim title, so it was a win-win for him.
Lightweight champion.
Just like this next finish, Tony Ferguson versus Donald Cerrone. Now, this one's gotta be up there in the Ferguson Hall of Fame. It's also one of the most intense ones in this video today, so buckle up. Back in June of 2019 at UFC 238, this match was a treat for the fans and definitely not for the faint of heart. A lot of people would even call this match weird or strange. But one thing that wasn't weird or strange was the way Tony finished his opponent in this match. The first round was pretty normal, nothing too intense, but the second round was where all that changed. Ferguson landed a knee in his opponent's face, breaking his nose. Although he didn't win the fight right away, the fight was stopped. But after that, Cerrone decided to blow his nose, which was already bloody and broken. This caused his eye to swell shut, forcing him to go to the hospital. Insult to injury, not only did Cerrone have to go to the hospital with a swollen eye and battered nose, it was Tony who walked out of the octagon as the winner. He beat Cerrone by TKO at the end of the second round, in a way that was pretty controversial, but still kind of iconic, to be honest. Still though,
Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of round 2, the doctor has called a stop to this contest.
quite a lot of people weren't happy with the result. But enough about that. Let me tell you about this next finish that was just as good. Tony Ferguson versus Anthony Pettis. Anthony Pettis is a name that strikes fear in the hearts of even some of the best fighters in the game today. So you know, when it was announced that the two were going to face off in the octagon, the hype was on. This was back at UFC 229 on October 6th in 2018. Both of these fighters are fierce, so obviously no one could really predict who was going to to walk away as the winner. When the fight started, it was more of a back and forth rather than one fighter dominating. That was until the second round started and things started to make a lot more sense. This is when Ferguson started to display that classic strength that he's known for and dominated the second round, landing a bunch of power-backed strikes at his opponent. Ferguson got hurt during the second round, but that didn't stop him. He landed an elbow in his opponent's face right after, which resulted in a deep cut right by Pettis' left eye. As the blood poured out, he prepared to attack again, but Ferguson avoided his opponent's strike. The intensity of the fight continued until trainer Duke Rufus stopped the match because Pettis had broken his right hand. Now, fans never exactly enjoy it when a fight is stopped, but this one was so bloody and intense, they were actually happy someone put an end to it.
Anthony Pettis breaks his right hand. Duke Rufus not going to send his longtime pupil out there.
No one was happier than Ferguson, though, because he walked away as the winner of the match.
Anthony Pettis' corner has called a stop to this fight, declaring the winner by TKO.
Just like he did in this next fight, Tony Ferguson versus Josh Thompson. This was at UFC Fight Night 71 back in July of 2015. Ferguson stayed dominant throughout the fight. As soon as the match started, he landed some power punches that made it clear who was going to win the fight. His opponent didn't stand a chance against him. Although Josh tried to avoid most of Tony's strikes, it was all in vain. But then, with just a minute left in the first round, Ferguson attempted a jumping knee, but Thompson caught him, throwing him down to the canvas. Then in the second round, Tony tried his best to get his opponent to submit, but the veteran wasn't going to do that without putting up a fight. Ferguson delivered a standing elbow that dropped his opponent, but even then, Tony wasn't able to get Thompson to submit. The referee stood both fighters up, but that wasn't the end of it. After a while into the second round, Ferguson had landed a spinning back elbow that dropped his opponent to the canvas once again. This time, he knew he had to act fast, and he did, landing endless punches at his opponent until the referee stopped the fight and Ferguson was announced as the winner. Just like he won after an iconic finish in this next match, Tony Ferguson versus Ryan McGilvery. This was at TUF 13 back in 2011 on the 7th episode, and we got to see one of the best finishes on the show. It was the quarterfinal matchup, and Ferguson pleased fans with his unmatched display of strength and his signature grappling skills. Then, after a while into the first round, Ferguson was able to take Ryan down by locking him in a rear naked choke that looked so brutal. I don't even want to imagine how it felt on the receiving end. No offense to Ryan, but it made for one entertaining spectacle.
Absolutely not. This went the exact way I wanted it to be. I wanted him to come at me, use all that aggression, leave no energy for that submission.
And that was all about some of Tony Ferguson's most brutal finishes in the UFC and Ultimate Fighter.
I'm a professional, and I will continue to be professional. I'm gonna teach this kid a lesson. He talks too much.
Tony Ferguson.